Incredible moment revealed. CEO's mute daughter speaks for the first time after 8 amazing years. The city lights flickered in kaleidoscopic splendor as Emily Turner loomed backstage under the grandeur of the gala's chandelier. Her father, Robert, would be the king of this extravaganza, and she the perfect crown jewel. Yet as the glitz and glamour enveloped her, she felt invisible, a mere shadow in his towering ambition. The walls felt like they were closing in, an overwhelming tide of expectation threatening to drown her. All her life, she had been silent, a mute girl amid the chaotic symphony of Chicago's tech elite, both adrift and yearning to be seen. Years of suppression lingered within her, the words trapped as echoes potent with resentment and fear. Her art studio, her haven, the only place where she spoke through paint and canvas, stood in stark contrast to the world of accolades and loud ambitions outside. The monumental installation, a visceral tapestry woven from vibrant colors and raw emotion, was the culmination of her unvoiced thoughts. And tonight, it was supposed to illuminate the gala, yet it also held the potential for heartbreak. As the minutes raced towards her entry, those feelings escalated into a whirlpool of anxiety. What if it doesn't resonate? She thought, clutching the edges of the installation as if it could anchor her in the tide of uncertainty. A single look from her father could bring the house down. But what if that look came filled with disappointment rather than applause? She felt torn, her heart pulling her towards the honesty of her creation, yet sheathed by the chains of parental expectation. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. A surge of nausea rippled through her as Robert's weighty vision loomed in her mind. Would he even notice her unspoken plea for recognition? She chewed her lip, a frazzled mess beneath the designer dress he had chosen. Each glimmering camera flash only amplified her self-doubt. If she stepped up to that microphone, she would be revealing herself naked and exposed, raw and vulnerable with each heartbeat. The audience shifted into a murmur of anticipation just beyond the crimson curtain, tightening the noose of pressure around her throat. The installation, a mirror of her soul, gleamed in shades of defiance and sorrow. But what would revealing her artistry say about their relationship? Could she bear the weight of failing her father's vision? Each thought flickered like a faulty bulb above her head, casting shadows of doubt. Standing before the microphone, she felt fate tiptoe toward her, ready to either liberate her or plunge her deeper into silence. Would Robert's proud eyes see strength or think her an outcast? A crack of chaos stirred within, a tempest of fear swirling around her resolve. The audience waited. The air buzzed thick with tension. Emily took a shaky breath, her hands trembling as she wrapped around the cool metal of the microphone. The moment hung suspended in time, a crossroads of identity and love. Would she finally break her silence? Or would she choose to dissolve into the backdrop of her father's empire? Just as she inhaled to speak, the spotlight brightened, the crowd hushed, and everything fell away but her truth. Would she find her voice at the risk of everything she feared? The world around Emily narrowed into a single point, the microphone before her, a chasm between expectation and reality. This was it, her moment to defy the silence that had wrapped itself around her for years. The fluttering crowd, dressed in their elegant finery, faded in the background, their murmurs reduced to a low hum. She felt her pulse race, her heart drumming a battle anthem of courage and fear. What if she did speak? What if she truly unveiled her heart and soul, revealing the tumult of emotions hidden behind her mute facade? Each beat of her heart echoed louder, pushing her to confront the long-standing silence. A voice that had long been stifled wrestled within her, urging her to unleash the weighty burden of her truth. Her father, Robert, stood at the far end of the room, a titan of expectation, his gaze steady, searching. It was his empire, his vision, yet here she was, ready to redefine the narrative he had crafted about her. A pang of doubt shot through her. Perhaps he would see her as an intrusion, an unwelcome reminder of his carefully framed world. What if her artistic expression fell flat, extinguished beneath the grandeur of his polished legacy? But even in that moment of hesitation, the air thickened with anticipation and electrifying force that urged her forward. She took another breath and shifted her gaze from the audience to the artwork she had devoted herself to for months. In that colorful chaos lay her spirit, her experiences, her fears, and her desires. Each brushstroke spoke of her journey, and she realized that hiding behind her father's silhouette would only suffocate her. Emily leaned closer to the microphone, doing what she had always done in the solitude of her studio. She channeled her emotions into creation. No longer would she suppress her voice. Taking a deep, wavering breath, she focused. She imagined the release of all her fears, watching as they scattered like petals in the wind. "I am Emily Turner," she began, her voice strangely steady, blooming like the first light of dawn. "I am not just my father's daughter." The words escaped her with slow assurance, each syllable steeped in vulnerability. There was no turning back now. She was peeling back layers of expectation and shame, unveiling the person she was meant to be. She spoke about her years of silence. A compelling wave of warmth seemed to envelop her. Emily painted her struggles with honesty, recounting the rallying fear that had once bound her. The audience, captivated, leaned in, absorbing her story through the vibrant colors of her installation. With each revelation, she felt the cobwebs of self-doubt begin to unravel. She was finally reshaping her identity, and it felt exhilarating. But deep down, she harbored a flicker of anxiety. Would her father understand this new version of her? What if he didn't see her brave attempt to break free? Her nerves danced alongside the thrill of sharing her truth, but the fear of his reaction lingered like a ghost, haunting the edges of her newfound resolve. She concluded with a passionate plea to embrace one's true self. The room erupted into applause. It was electric, a cascade of admiration that surged through her being. Yet, amid the cheers, her eyes found Robert, and his expression was inscrutable, a storm brewing within that she could not decipher. The room brightened, yet shadows still loomed. She had spoken, truly spoken, but the most critical moment lay ahead, their confrontation. Would he embrace her newfound voice or bury it beneath the weight of his expectations? The question loomed heavily in the air as the applause echoed around her, a promise of change teetering uncertainly on the horizon. The moment of truth approached, and she knew she would have to face the consequences of her courage. What awaited her once the spotlight faded? Emily stepped down from the stage, a whirlwind of emotions surging within her. The applause still resonated in her ears, a stark contrast to the daunting silence that awaited outside the echoes of admiration. Each step toward her father felt heavier than the last. The exhilaration of her performance was being quickly overshadowed by a creeping sense of dread. Perhaps it was the weight of her unveiling that sat heavy on her shoulders, the reality of standing alone, carving her own identity in a landscape she had once only inhabited through her father's shadow. Walking through the crowd, she caught snippets of conversation, the buzz of excitement around her art and her words. They didn't understand, she thought. How could they? They had seen the surface, the applause, but not the unraveling threads of her past woven intricately beneath it all. With each smile offered to her by well-meaning patrons, a deep discomfort stirred. Did they see her, or did they see Robert's daughter? When she finally reached her father, he stood with an impenetrable mask. His demeanor was unreadable, an amalgamation of pride and the storm of disappointment she feared. The applause faded away, leaving behind a deafening silence that hung uncomfortably between them. "Robert," she ventured, searching his eyes for a flicker of warmth. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on the artwork behind her. Immersed in the chaos of colors she poured her heart into. "You had a lot of guts, Em," he said finally, voice flat, as if dissecting a business proposal rather than his daughter's long-awaited declaration. The dismissal sliced through her. "I wasn't seeking your approval. This is my journey," she asserted, the feeble remnants of insecurity igniting into defiance. Did he think the years of silence would merely dissolve into applause? It's not just about your legacy or your vision anymore. He stiffened, eyes narrowing as if her words struck a chord that resounded deep within him. And what do you think this is, Emily? The tone had shifted, now carrying a weight she hadn't expected. What part of this is truly yours? It's all influenced by my vision, whether you admit it or not. The room spun. His words echoed, striking against the walls of her newfound courage. Was she really breaking free, or was she simply painting over the walls of his empire? Doubt crept in, claws raking through her jagged confidence. You don't have to control everything. I am an artist, not a puppet. She breathed, real fear reshaping her determination into something sharper. He stepped closer, the space between them charged with conflicting energies. You think it's that simple? We built this for you, Emily. I crafted opportunities for you to thrive in the very environment you now reject. It takes more than just bravado to maintain a legacy. A silence, charged and tense, simmered in the air between their opposing worlds. Her heart raced. Did she owe him in some way for his sacrifices? Or was that guilt another chain she didn't have to bear anymore? The confrontation was layered, a clash of ideals. Dreams suffocated beneath the weight of legacy. I need to find my own voice, she repeated, confidence threading through the tremor of fear. I want to explore what this means for me, not just for you. If I fail, let me fail on my own terms. His expression flickered uncertainty or anger. She couldn't tell anymore. The conversation hung precariously, a pivot point that could lead to either recognition of her individuality or an entrenchment in his expectations. The air remained thick with unspoken words, and a part of her felt that the stakes had never been clearer. But would he forgive her self-assertion, or would it drive a wedge into the very foundation of their relationship? As she searched his face for truths unsaid, the rift deepened. The time had come to face more than just the silence, she realized, internalizing the weight of her choices. What awaited them was not just a battle of wills, but the potential fracture of their familial bond against the burgeoning sunrise of her autonomy. And in that moment of uncertainty, she silenced the doubts swirling within her, knowing that every path forward carried its own burden, a burden she was finally prepared to bear. What remained now was the choice, to continue crafting her destiny with or without his approval. The tension between Emily and Robert lingered as they stood in the gallery, the vibrant colors surrounding them only amplifying the grayscale distortions of their confrontation. A mix of pride and resentment swirled in the air, intoxicating yet suffocating. As the reality of her choices settled in, she felt torn between passion and obligation, yearning for validation while fiercely resisting control. For days after the showcase, whispers wrapped around her about her art, her message, and the undeniable legacy of her father. Emotions collided inside her, igniting a vulnerability she had thought long buried. Each comment felt like both an accolade and a chain, binding her to expectations she struggled to escape. The promise of independence danced at the periphery of her consciousness, yet shadows of doubt still lurked within. The moment she returned to her studio, she hesitated at the threshold, an uncharted territory where her identity awaited discovery. Walls adorned with her creations served as a constant reminder, yet she felt like a stranger within her own space, questioning every stroke of paint that once felt innate. Was this truly her voice echoing on canvas, or merely a reflection of everything her father had ever wanted her to convey? Feeling suffocated, she decided to arrange her materials. The once comforting ritual of creativity now felt like an endeavor weighed down by scrutiny. She meticulously lined brushes, organizing them by size and color, as if that might align her thoughts into something coherent. And yet, as she grappled with these existential concerns, clarity slowly emerged. Staring intensely at her latest piece, she noticed a spark unraveling in her chest, signaling a burgeoning intent. It was an abstract interpretation of her internal conflict, a cascade of colors throwing themselves against the canvas, reminiscent of her frustration and freedom intertwined. Her gut rippled with an inexplicable charge. This wasn't just art. It was her battle cry, a manifestation of her raw defiance against the confinement of legacy. Days morphed into nights as she poured herself into her work, the chaos transforming into structure, a dialogue of her truths finally surfacing. She embraced her past, acknowledging it as part of her journey, while pushing forward to create a distinct voice, unshackled from the weight of expectation. Each session felt like a charting of a new course, urging her closer to an authentic self. With every brushstroke, she unearthed deeply buried emotions, feeling empowered yet terrified, exhilarated yet exposed. Could she sustain this newfound independence? It was exhilarating to claim her space, yet the specter of Robert's judgment lingered, a reminder of the familial ties that shaped her identity. She knew, however, that to continue on this path, she would need to confront him again, to solidify her resolve in the face of his expectations. On a brisk evening punctuated by the fading light, Emily set out to seek him out, determination coursing through her veins. Her heart quickened with the prospect of a conversation that could either reinforce her autonomy or throw her back into the shadows. It would be a definitive moment, a reckoning of sorts, where art would not solely reflect her struggle but also define her new reality. As she arrived at his office, the air felt charged, almost electric, resonating with the potential for confrontation. Standing at the door, she gathered her courage, a wave of anticipation colliding with anxiety. It was time to reveal the evolution of her artistry, to seize the narrative of her life, and carve her place in a legacy that had always felt borrowed. With each step toward the threshold, she sensed that every heartbeat echoed with possibility. Would he finally see her as Emily, the artist, not just Robert's daughter? Would this be the moment that unlocked understanding? The door loomed before her, an entrance not just into his domain but into a pivotal chapter of her life that could redefine everything. Emily paused for a moment, her hand hovering above the doorknob. It felt like a boundary between two worlds, before and after. She sensed the weight of her decision, an invisible tether pulling at her resolve. Was she ready to confront the man who had cast such a long shadow over her creative spirit? With a deep breath, she twisted the knob and pushed the door open, the soft click echoing in the quiet confines of Robert's office. The room, with its stark lines and muted tones, reflected the rigid expectations she had long fought against. Robert looked up from his desk, surprise briefly flickering across his face before it gave way to his signature, composed demeanor. "Emily," he greeted, his voice steady but the lack of warmth stung. "Dad," she replied, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Yet beneath that faintness, she felt an urgency stirring, an itch of defiance nestled within her very essence. As they locked eyes, she sensed the familiar, daunting crowd of expectations lurking just beyond the walls. This moment wasn't merely about sharing her art, it was about redefining their relationship. She wasn't just his daughter. She was an artist in her own right, and the time had come to make him see that. "I've been working on something," she started, each word an act of rebellion against years of imposed silence. She pushed her paintings forward. The vibrant colors burst like a wildfire into the sterile atmosphere of his office. "These pieces reflect who I am, not just your reflection of who I should be." Robert's expression flickered between confusion and skepticism. She could see the gears turning in his head, trying to process the shift in power dynamics the moment she laid her identity bare before him. It was exhilarating yet terrifying. "They're interesting," he offered, his tone non-committal. Emily's heart sank but her resolve hardened. This wasn't merely about understanding. It was about conviction. "Interesting isn't enough?" she challenged, stepping closer. "They're my voice, my story." Each word sharpened with conviction, her vulnerability transforming into armor. "I refuse to hide behind your legacy any longer." An uncomfortable silence ensued, punctuated only by the muffled sounds of the world outside. Emily's heart raced, each beat a reminder of her determination. "I want you to understand that I'm not just your daughter. I need you to support me for who I am, not who you want me to be." Robert's eyes narrowed, and Emily braced herself for a rebuttal filled with the cautious strategy he always employed. Yet this time she was ready. She wouldn't step back into that familiar shadow. "Art is not just a product of history. It's a dialogue with the present." She pressed on, her voice growing steadier. If you can't separate me from the expectations tied to our family name, then maybe you don't really see me at all. He shifted in his seat, and for a moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes as he absorbed her words. She could sense the internal struggle brewing. Deep down, perhaps he fought to reconcile his own expectations with the reality of her burgeoning identity. A new tension crackled in the air, one fueled by the conflict between parental oversight and artistic autonomy. Emily felt the power of her voice, alive, defiant. "I assent that what you always wanted for me?" she asked, her gaze unwavering. "To be authentic? To find my own path?" "Authenticity comes with responsibility, Emily," Robert replied, pinching his lips into a thin line. The battle between his paternal instincts and societal pressures was palpable, but she sensed a chink in the armor. As silence settled again, the space between them bristled with unexplored potential. She wondered if he would rise to meet her challenge or retreat behind familiar defenses. Emily didn't know how he would respond, but she did know one thing. She was ready for whatever came next, even if it meant facing rejection head-on. She had taken the first step into revealing her true self, and it felt irrevocable. "Are you prepared to let me be me?" she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment hung in the balance, a long pause filled with uncertainty and possibility. Would Robert finally choose to see her as an individual, an artist crafting her own legacy? In that charged silence, everything seemed to hinge on his next words, loaded with the weight of their futures and the fate of her artistry. What would be born from this pivotal confrontation? The silence stretched on, a taut string vibrating with unsaid words, and Emily felt as if the very air crackled with anticipation. Robert opened his mouth, hesitated, then closed it again, grappling with the tide of emotions surging to the surface. Emily's pulse quickened. She faced him with a blend of hope and fear, unsure of which way the needle would swing. He finally exhaled, a resigned release that felt like a balloon deflating. "Emily," he began, but the words evaporated before they could take form. The disappointment on his face sent a ripple of anxiety through her chest. She had risked so much to lay her truth bare, and now, in the face of uncertainty, she felt a flicker of doubt. Had she miscalculated? "I think you need to understand," he ventured again, this time more firmly. "Art has always been a reflection of the artist, yes, but it also carries the weight of expectations, reputation, and history. Your name matters, Emily, connects you to something larger, something meaningful." And yet, Emily interjected swiftly, her voice rising with each word, "It's those very expectations that have stifled me. Do you not see? I've spent my life performing to appease your standards, your legacy." The anger flared inside her, igniting a drive born from years of suppression. "I'm not asking to erase our family history. I'm asking to build my own on top of it." Robert's face twisted in a mixture of concern and pride, battling to maintain his professional facade. She could almost see the tipping point approach, and she was compelled to bring it forth. "Life isn't a ledger to balance. It's a canvas to paint." His brow furrowed, and for a moment, Emily felt that perhaps she had struck a nerve. She adjusted her stance, not out of fear but determination. "The world doesn't need another replica of your success. It needs authenticity, which is born from imperfection. I'm ready to embrace all of me, flaws and all." With each argument spoken, Emily grew stronger. She felt emboldened by her own words, even as she stared into the depths of her father's unwillingness to see her as anything but an extension of his ambitions. The transformation taking shape inside her felt palpable. This was no longer just a battle for her identity but a quest for validation and respect. "Look at my work," she implored, gesturing to the vibrant canvases that now dominated the room. "Each brush stroke is a part of me, my struggle, my joy, my pain. I've poured everything into these pieces as an offering for the world that I wish to embrace, not as your daughter, but as Emily the artist." For the first time, Robert's expression wavered. Uncertainty flickered across his features, a thoughtful introspection emerging. Emily seized the moment, refusing to back down. "Can you accept my truth, Dad?" Can you allow me the freedom to forge my own path despite what lies behind me? A long silence consumed the room once more. Emily's pulse raced. She read the emotions flowing through Robert, the mixture of pride and fear mirrored in her own heart. This was not merely a confrontation. This was a dual awakening for them, both her quest for self-assertion and perhaps his acceptance of her growing autonomy. Just when it appeared he might respond, the door behind her opened sharply, shattering the fragile moment. A colleague stepped inside, disrupting the charged atmosphere like a splash of ice water, plunging both into reality. "Robert, we have to discuss the quarterly reports." Emily felt her resolve weaken momentarily, as her thoughts spiraled in different directions. It wasn't over yet, but this interruption felt all too familiar, a reminder of the world outside that constantly encroached, pressing against the boundaries of her creativity. As she focused on Robert, she realized that their conversation was merely beginning. Each word spoken had uprooted something foundational. More than just an artist, she felt now that she was a catalyst for change, not only in herself but in the relationship she held with this man who so often defined her. Summoning her courage, she stepped back, preparing to re-engage. The key question remained. Would Robert still allow the noise of the outside world to drown out this nascent voice of independence? And in that moment of uncertainty, as they both prepared to collide once more with their true selves, Emily felt a renewed fire within her, a drive to push through and pursue this unexplored territory that awaited on the horizon. Now was the time to pursue that legacy, her legacy, and not falter again. Yet, the answer lingered just out of reach. What awaited them beyond the chaos of interruption and self-discovery? Would Robert step into the light of a new relationship, or retreat back into the shadows of expectation? The disruption echoed like a thunderclap, peeling Emily's focus away from the moment that felt historically charged. Robert's colleague, with his clattering files and businesslike demeanor, seemed so far removed from the emotional battleground that had just been laid out. As the man droned on about reports, spreadsheets, and projections, Emily stood motionless, feeling a drowning sense of urgency clawing for her attention. It was not the external chaos that shook her, but a deep, internal restlessness emerging from the foundation laid bare just moments before. Emily wanted to scream or laugh or do both. Here they were on the precipice of transformation, yet an offhand mention of quarterly goals now held the room hostage. She felt as though a dam had broken, unleashing currents of a newfound self-awareness that buzzed just beneath her skin. But would she be able to harness this momentum, or would it slip away into the monotony of expectation, swept along by the proverbial current of her fatherless world? While Robert dealt with the intrusion, Emily utilized the moment to reflect on what had been about to transpire. Each inhalation became an exercise in self-affirmation. Despite the interruptions that menaced her aspirations, she relayed the strength of her convictions. The potential whispered just beyond the threshold of uncertainty demanded to be explored. This was her moment to seize, even if for now, it had to be grasped quietly with purpose. She turned her gaze back to the canvases. They stood as colored pillars of her voice, a chorus repeating tales of resilience and courage that defied the silence often surrounding her familial connections. The faces captured and the forms rendered invited the world to witness not only her art but the evolving narrative of who she intended to be. That when clarity struck, like an artist finding the perfect shade. The best way forward would not only be to redefine her relationship with Robert, but also to showcase her work in ways that shouted rather than whispered her truth. It was time to transform those colorful truths into a vibrant shield. They could become her foundation, her rallying point against external expectations and internal doubts. As Robert's colleague continued speaking, Emily's heart raced. She could visualize a gallery exhibition, her art commanding the walls, while her voice threaded through the room, echoing her reality. A narrative created on her terms, bold, unapologetic, filled with the spectrums of her experience. The thought alone filled her with energy. The moment Robert finished his discussion, his attention shifted back to her, the weight of interrupted dialogue still hanging between them. He looked tentative. Uncertainty was swirling in his eyes. This was the crack she needed. If she focused her intentions, she could step through it and claim her autonomy. "Dad," she said, her voice steady, Can we find a time when we can talk again? Not about art, not about reports, just us. I want to set a date for an exhibit. It's time I shared my work with the world on my own terms. Robert opened his mouth, the tides of surprise and pride battling for supremacy. But before he could formulate a response, she pressed on, emboldened by her own thoughts. This isn't about you anymore. It's about me, Dad. And I need you to see that. The uncertainty around Robert crystallized into silence. Emily could feel the palpable shift, a small ember of potential igniting amidst the ashes of old expectations. But even as she felt this push towards independence, a flicker of doubt wrestled within her. Would he truly understand? Was she prepared for the fallout if he didn't? Would her commitment to redefine herself lead to acceptance or further alienation? Those questions loomed, intensifying the air around them. The urgency of her plea mingled with the tension awaiting resolution. What awaited was unknown. As she stepped back, allowing the weight of her desire to settle into the room, the unyielding question stirred within her. What if this was merely the beginning? What if the road to self-realization demanded challenges she hadn't yet prepared to face? With renewed determination, Emily realized this journey was about harnessing the chaos as it unraveled around her. The stage was set for a confrontation not just with Robert, but with the very essence of what it meant to evolve against the expectations that had haunted her for so long. And as she stood there, anticipation coiling within her like a spring ready to release, she knew the next step would be the most significant yet. Was she brave enough to embrace the uncertainties that would come with sharing her artistic identity with the world? The weight of silence filled the space between Emily and her father, drawing their gazes together like magnets pulled by unseen forces. Clarity pierced through her previous doubts, and her decision solidified. This was not merely a request but a declaration of self. She searched Robert's face, their history flickering in the tension, a blend of pride, confusion, and perhaps a hint of fear. Emily, he finally said, his voice a measured tremor. I didn't realize you felt this way. The veils of misunderstanding began to peel away, but uncertainty still shadowed his expression. She felt a strange sense of urgency. This dialogue could fortify her resolve or send her tumble down a path of old habits and suppressed desires. It's easy to forget, Dad, that our lives don't have to be intertwined in the same narrative. I love art, and I need to share that passion. I want people to see it, to understand my perspective. His furrowed brow showed his struggle to reconcile dreams with the reality he had meticulously crafted for her, a reality that nearly snuffed out her spirit. I believe in you, he replied cautiously, the words an olive branch amidst the chaos. But art isn't just about passion. It requires strategy, business acumen. Are you prepared for that? The challenge stung, not because he doubted her talent, but because he was echoing the very uncertainty she sought to escape. Yet within that sting she found resolve. I will learn. I will navigate the business side. I won't abandon my art to the shadows. This is about more than just a gallery, it's about my voice. With her heart racing, Emily envisioned strategies to turn her aspirations into tangible reality. She thought of networking, reaching out to potential mentors, and immersing herself in both the art community and business fundamentals. Though the journey would be daunting, the prospect of her work hanging boldly on the walls filled her with exhilaration. Can we set a date? She asked, defying expectation. I need your support, not just as my father, but as someone who believes in what I can achieve. As she spoke those words, they felt like stepping stones toward her independence. Moments stretched out, the silence thickening as Robert scrutinized her with care. She could feel the change brewing between them, both hopeful and unnerving. I'll help, he finally relented, his voice steadier now. Let us plan this together. I can introduce you to some people who might be interested in your work. With that mutual agreement wedged between them, Emily allowed herself a breath, a feeling of burgeoning exhilaration mingling with her apprehensions. Yes, this was transformation, but it would not come without its struggles. But as she walked through the residual tension wrapping around them like a stubborn fog, a gnawing doubt crept into her mind. Could she really balance the artistry she yearned to express with the businessman's pragmatic world? Would Robert's connections allow her the creative freedom she craved? The fractures of old expectations loomed in the background, whispering skepticism. Each obstacle felt insurmountable as she prepared for this unfamiliar venture. And then it struck her. Moving into the art world would demand not just courage but the cultivation of resilience she was not entirely sure she possessed. Could embracing her artistic identity also mean wrestling with the ensuing emotional complexities, such as the fear of rejection and the vulnerability that exposing her work would inevitably unveil? Determination surged again, though tinged with trepidation. Every scene she envisioned the gazes of admiration, the conversations about her work, the energy of creativity blending with professional ambition unfurled like a plucked string vibrating in her core. As she declared their next steps out loud, Emily couldn't ignore the flicker of fear pressing against the edges of her excitement. What if she felt unprepared, standing before a crowd with her heart bare? Stepping back from those thoughts, she shook them off, convincing herself. This was her choice. This was her moment. Let's meet next week. Then, Robert proposed, his voice shaking off its previous hesitation. We'll start with some brainstorming sessions. With a nod, Emily reinforced her resolve, ready now to lean into the formidable uncertainty that her artistic ambitions would unleash. She understood that this journey would not simply unveil her talents but would confront and redefine the very essence of her relationships and self-image. With every step towards planning her exhibition, Emily embraced the disquietude swirling within her. The road ahead promised to be difficult, fraught with emotional intensity and self-discovery. And as she faced this new chapter of her life, another question began to pulse within her. What would she uncover about herself in the process of unveiling her art to the world? Would this journey be liberating, or would it bury her deeper into the shadows she hoped to escape? Emily sat alone in her small studio, the sun filtering through the dusty windows, casting golden hues on unfinished canvases. Each stroke of paint beckoned her, whispering secrets of her untapped potential. Yet, beneath the vibrant colors lay the suffocating weight of uncertainty. The promise she made to herself and her father lingered heavily in the air, a mix of excitement and dread. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her sketchbook, the familiar texture grounding her as she began to sketch the faint outlines of her latest inspiration. Art had long been her sanctuary, yet now it evolved into a field for confrontation. Would her creativity withstand the scrutiny of the art world? Could she translate her visions into something more than personal solace? The stark contrast between her world and the business side was an alarm that rang loudly in her ears. Emily paused and closed her eyes, opening herself to the memory of her father's hesitant words. Art requires strategy. Strategy, she understood the words, yet they were laden with expectations. How could she merge her love for art with the meticulous demands of business? Quickly, a plan began to form. Networking would be her lifeline, but she needed more than just connections. She needed to cultivate a persona. Emily pushed aside nagging doubts, focusing on her ability to engage with artists, collectors, and galleries. She could not merely be an artist but would step into the role of a professional, willing to forge her path with tenacity. In the weeks that followed, Emily immersed herself in research. She learned about marketing techniques, branding, and how to construct an artist's statement that would encapsulate her essence. While the online articles provided a wealth of information, it was the conversations with fellow artists that breathed life into her aspirations. Each interaction chipped away at her insecurities, revealing hidden competencies she had yet to fully embrace. As she gathered wisdom from her peers, her confidence blossomed. Each shared story became a seed planted in the fertile soil of her own ambitions. One Saturday, she attended a local art fair, buzzing with creativity and the scent of acrylic paint. The energy was electric, but as she navigated the crowded aisles, she felt the familiar grip of apprehension. Would anyone recognize her as more than the daughter of a CEO? The thought sickened her, a lingering reminder of her past, intertwined with old expectations. Pushing through the discomfort, she approached a booth displaying the work of new artists. Each canvas ignited a sense of possibility. In one corner, a collection of vibrant landscapes caught her eye, Among the attendees was a stout man dialoguing energetically with an artist, his laughter carrying waves of energy through the space. Summoning her courage, Emily sidled up to them. "Your work is incredible," she said, her voice steady, surprising even herself. The man turned, his attentive gaze peaked. "Thank you. I spent years finding my style. What about you? What do you create?" As conversations flowed, Emily found herself sharing her vision and aspirations, not just the shadow of expectations. For the first time, she articulated her desire to bridge her artistic passions with the professional world. The enthusiasm sparked a connection, and moments later, she exchanged contact information with a reputable gallery owner championing emerging artists. For the first time, Emily felt glimmers of hope pierce through the fog. Perhaps her dream was not beyond reach. Perhaps her voice could rise above the noise. As she left the fair, exhilaration coursed through her veins. She had navigated the initial challenges, but remnants of self-doubt still clung to her resolve. The lingering question remained: could she sustain momentum, or would she succumb to the familiar whispers of inadequacy? Determined to tackle these challenges head-on, she headed home, invigorated and introspective. The shadows she sought to escape were not just external but internal, and wrestling with them would not cease. The path ahead stretched out before her, littered with uncertainties and promises. What would it take to truly accept her place within this competitive arena? What would she have to sacrifice or challenge within herself to emerge victorious? As Emily approached the threshold of her door, a new question settled in her mind, one she never thought she would ask. Who was she truly meant to be as an artist, and how would that shape the relationships she was building? The Grand Gallery buzzed with an energy Emily Turner had once feared as she stepped into the expansive space, her heart pounding with anticipation. The moment had arrived, her first exhibition, a manifestation of her journey from silence to self-expression. Each piece hung with purpose, vibrant stories pulled from the recesses of her heart, and proudly inserted into the world for everyone to see, not just her father. Standing amidst her work, Emily felt a surge of accomplishment. Just months ago, she had existed in shadows, restrained by her father's towering expectations. Now, she had transformed her intimate vulnerabilities into public triumphs. A voice that had once remained unspoken resonated through her art, defying the constraints that had held her captive for too long. She was no longer defined as Robert Turner's daughter. She had undeniably stepped into her identity as an artist. She felt a gentle nudge of satisfaction course through her as observers moved from piece to piece, their lively discussions about her work igniting an electric wave of recognition. Each compliment shed layers of inhibition, showcasing the authenticity that she had fought to assert. Her brushstrokes echoed her struggles, and the audience was immersed in the very essence she had fought to share. Robert entered the gallery, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, lingering on Emily. There was a distinct change in his demeanor. Gone was the facade of overwhelming scrutiny, replaced by a glimmer of pride that softened his features. As their eyes locked, the chasm between them began to bridge. Taking a deep breath, she approached him, her heart racing with both anticipation and apprehension. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice steady yet infused with vulnerability. His eyes danced with emotion as he surveyed the pieces that reflected her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. "They're remarkable, Emily," he said slowly, the weight of sincerity punctuating each word. "You've captured so much depth here, your journey, your heart. I'm proud of you." The words washed over her like a warm tide, the relief immediate and profound. This was no simple affirmation. It was an acknowledgement of her individuality, a recognition that her voice resonated beyond mere familial ties. In this moment, she felt the powerful weight of recognition, a feeling she had longed for yet had almost given up hope for. The exhibition flourished, with attendees offering their insights and admiration. Emily reveled in their excitement, her confidence solidifying with each passing conversation. She claimed her narrative, recounting the stories behind her creations. The fears that once crippled her now transformed into a foundation upon which she built her identity as the night progressed. Emily took a moment to step outside, the cool breeze brushing against her flushed cheeks. She felt triumphant, her soul buoyed by the collective acknowledgement of her work. The world had witnessed her metamorphosis from the girl cloaked in silence to a woman commanding her narrative. A creator charting her own destiny. When she returned to the bustling gallery, Robert approached again, his expression earnest. "I want to be part of this journey for you. Truly," he stated, sincerity radiating from his gaze. "You've shown immense growth, and I see now that your potential can't be confined to my expectations." His admission was a milestone, a silent acknowledgement of their evolution, an embrace of their changed dynamic. Emily felt the weight of years expiring in a moment, signaling the promise of what lay ahead. Now, she felt prepared to craft a career rooted in both the artistic freedom she craved and the business acumen she had studied. She would approach this new world with the confidence she had cultivated amidst her fears, armed with the knowledge that every stroke of her brush was a testament to her identity. As the evening unfolded and conversations flowed, Emily reveled in her newfound assurance. The once daunting horizon loomed bright with potential, not just as an artist but as a woman ready to navigate the complexities of her chosen path. Encouraged by Robert's realization of her independence, she recognized that perhaps the legacy they would shape together would thrive on the very foundations of individuality. In that moment, she understood. Overcoming challenges had not only transformed her artistry, but had redefined her relationship with her father. Their bond now woven into the fabric of shared aspirations rather than expectation, forged through respect and mutual understanding. Emily Turner stood at the intersection of her past and the future, a young artist ready to conquer a world that once seemed daunting. The journey ahead was a canvas yet unwritten, and with a heart full of promise, she prepared to paint it and share her legacy, not as Robert's daughter, but as Emily the artist, the architect of her own narrative. Now is the time to champion your own story. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.